It's been about 10 months since the original release of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, so we're basically out of the honeymoon phase at this point, which means we can take a better look at the game as a whole. And boy, did Xenoblade 3 change a lot of big aspects about the Xenoblade series as a whole. But, were the changes good or bad? Well, that's what I'm here to find out, so let's get into it. The most obvious change that Xenoblade 3 made to the series was the party size. Xenoblade 1 and 2 only had 3 party members available at one time. Of course, Xenoblade 2 had the ability to use 9 blades, but since the driver was only auto-attacking and taking damage, it basically was still only 3 characters were usable at one time. Xenoblade 3 completely flipped this precedent on its head. Now you can have up to 7 party members on the field at once, with 6 of them being able to be controlled at the click of a button. No longer do you need to hope that your healer actually heals when their healing art comes online. You can do it yourself. Unless your healer is in the hero slot, then yeah, you might still be screwed. They scaled everything to match the party size expanding, so having 6 party members isn't broken like it would be in previous titles if you could somehow do that. However, is it a good change at all? Well, this one is a lot more subjective depending on who you ask. Some may love this new system, some may prefer the old. This system does have its advantages, like you do get to see a lot more of each of the characters. In Xenoblade 1, where you have at most 7 party members, you can only see 3 of them in action at once in a fight. And although all of them appear in cutscenes, having more screen time for characters isn't a bad thing. Even just hearing their funny quotes during or after a battle can heighten a character a lot more than you'd think. It also gives the player more customization options. Back in a 3-member system, it was almost required to have a balanced team of 1 tank, healer, and attacker. Although this wasn't always the case, it was the easiest way to play the game for most people without going for meta builds or anything. Now with Xenoblade 3's 7-member system, you can customize the amount of healers, attackers, and defenders you have. If you want to run a system with 3 attackers, 1 defender, and 3 healers, go for it! It definitely gives the casual player more customization options without having to go too deep into meta builds or anything like that. But at the same time, it does have downsides. It can be a bit difficult sometimes to keep up with 7 people at the same time in the heat of a battle. And since everything's scaled for adding 4 extra members to the party, it can be more difficult to keep 4 extra members alive as well. This one is more about personal preference at the end of the day, but for me personally, I liked it. It kept the battle system fresh, and I liked seeing more of each character more often. But I wouldn't be upset if this was just a one-time thing and they go back to 3 for the next game. Or maybe this was just a test. In Xenoblade 4, we'll have 14 party members at once. Get ready. It wouldn't be an RPG without a battle system. At its core, the battle system has stayed the same with things like Break and Topple being mainstays, but it combines Xenoblade 1 and 2 specialties in Daze and Launch. Just don't tell anyone that Launch debuted in Xenoblade X instead of 2. But regardless, more sweeping changes were added too, which we'll discuss. Stuff like Revives, Chain Attack, and Ouroboros. So let's talk about Revives and Chain Attacks first. In both Xenoblade 1 and 2, Chain Attacks and Revives were directly correlated. Basically, you'd have to fill 3 bars to start a Chain Attack, which would then use all 3 bars. However, if you needed to revive a fallen member, you would have to use one of those same bars to do so. However, in Xenoblade 3, Chain Attacks and Revives are divided. Chain Attacks still require you to fill up a meter in a similar way to 1 and 2, but now Revives are not correlated at all with them. There is no need to use a bar to revive a member, which sounds great, but it comes at a cost. In older titles, anyone could revive a fallen member, but now that is something only healers can do. Healers do get infinite revives, but if all of your healers die in battle, it usually means curtains for your team. I personally am a fan of this change overall, but admittedly, it does suck that if all of my healers get killed by an AoE attack at any point in a battle, it usually means that I'm about to have to retry it. And since healers are usually the most fragile members, it'll probably happen a few times in a normal playthrough. However, I'm willing to live with it to have infinite revives that don't need to be recharged. Chain Attacks ended up getting overhauled again, with a huge change to the formula happening. Luckily, they actually teach you how to use them effectively in this game. Unlike another game we know, 2, but this one is much simpler to understand. You basically have 3 free chain attack sessions as long as you get over 100% on the gauge. Each character has a special effect on the chain attack depending on what order you choose, and if you complete both Ouroboros halves orders, you can use a special, stronger 4th order at the end. I also like this, but not enough where I would be opposed to something else in the next game. I personally like all the chain attack gimmicks in all 3 mainline games in their own way, even if 2's is the most difficult to understand and has the worst tutorial explaining it in-game. It keeps it fresh, and each one is satisfying to pull off. So I guess this technically would be a good change because it still is a chain attack at the end of the day, and it's still satisfying to get the big damage number at the end. Finally, the big battle gimmick. Ouroboros was introduced in this game to replace the blade system of 2 and the tension system of Xenoblade 1. This has it where after using fusion arts, you continue to level up the interlink level until it hits its max at level 3. Then you can use powerful arts and specials. To be honest, it's an alright gimmick. It ties directly into the story, and both cutscenes where the party members get their Ouroboros forms are some of the best moments in the game. But I personally like the blade system of Xenoblade 2 better. This isn't a bad change at all, I still enjoy it quite a bit, but the elements and blades of Xenoblade 2 were just more fun to me once I was able to actually learn how to do it. There's still some interesting stuff you can do with Ouroboros, and dishing out a ton of damage is still incredibly fun, but this is one of the few times I prefer 2's gimmick over 3's. Xenoblade 3 also added a few quality of life improvements to the game. Although this shouldn't have been something that they just added, one of the biggest game changers is being able to fight in the water. In previous titles, you could just not fight in the water. This was kind of baffling, because it's not like they couldn't attack you while you were in the water, so if a flying enemy aggroed onto you while you were swimming, you basically were screwed until you could find land. This allowed them to make cool enemies that were in the water, and although it sometimes can be a bit tougher to keep track of everything while in the water, I'm glad that it's finally a feature instead of being an annoyance that should have been changed back in 2010. They also added a new feature that shows you the path to something in a quest when applicable. This is the feature I use most often in the game. I can't really imagine doing side quests without it. Trying to find a certain thing and not knowing which route to take is annoying, and although it doesn't always give you the best route for your level, it still is useful, even if you're just trying to simply figure out where to start. It's a completely optional feature too, so if you prefer not knowing exactly where to go or enjoy getting lost and finding stuff, then that's still an option. However, for those of us who want it, it's there. They also fixed the terrible tutorial situation from Xenoblade 2. Although I personally didn't have too much trouble with the tutorials in the game, likely because I've played RPGs before and know how some of the mechanics work, for a lot of people the tutorials were lackluster and didn't really explain the mechanics that well. Regardless of whether people had trouble with it or not being able to rewatch tutorials after watching them once is incredibly stupid. This was fixed with a much more in-depth tutorial system that forces you to do the actions, with a whole menu dedicated to rewatching tutorials if needed. Even though this technically isn't quality of life, I'm glad they removed it. The dumb field skill system from Xenoblade 2. Listen, I love Xenoblade 2, but this is the dumbest thing they have ever put in their video games. Why do I need to use the gacha system to progress the game? It's one thing if it's like a level requirement or something, but I have to get certain elements to progress the main story? It felt annoying having to grind for more core crystals to just scrape by the point. So I'm glad they removed any sort of field skills to progress anything in the game. Quality of life improvements are always welcome. Although they can be small, they make a huge impact on the overall enjoyment of a game, especially an RPG that will be played for 50 hours at the least. They did add some improvements that seemed simple, like not being able to toggle the chain attack music on and off, but the changes they did make were good. So overall, were the changes good? Well, in my opinion, yeah. I think a lot of the changes were good changes to make this my personal favorite in the series, but none of this is objective. What I may find to be an improvement, some may find to be a downgrade. And that's okay. We all have different opinions, and some people will just prefer certain things that others don't. Hopefully, the next game will have even more good changes, even if they're just purely quality of life, so we can keep enjoying the series like many have for the last 13 years. Or even longer if you're a Gears or Saga fan, in which case I tip my hypothetical hat to you. Thank you for watching the video, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. Less than 5% of my viewers are subbed, and it's free and it helps support the channel a lot. Also, consider leaving a comment, maybe about your opinions about the changes made. I'd love to hear them, and I read every comment, even the 2,000-word essay ones. But with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, wherever you are, and this is Crystalized, signing out.